Okay, so we are not going to talk about any specific team. We are not in the NFL or college football. And matter of fact, this is the perfect time for the next 2 weeks. Not that I will not have more interviews, which I already have scheduled. College football still. We've got Ohio State coming up real soon. A bunch more. Cleveland, if you're a Browns fan, Clemson fan, so we're Ravens fan, we're stoked. But this is the week for college football and the NFL as far as previewing the season. So we have a lot of these preview reports coming up. We also have our fantasy report coming up with Draft Sharks on Friday. But this is a special interview because these two organizations, Our Lads, of course, me working with Our Lads, everybody knows at ourlads.com, and walterfootball.com. These two websites have been around and been at the top of the industry for a very long time. And to get me and Walter together, I think this might be the first time that a representative of Walter Football and Our Lads has ever spoken live before in a venue like this. Walter, thanks for doing this.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on. This is great. I've been, like I said before we started recording, I've been using your depth charts. Feels like for decades, just to help me with team needs and NFL draft preparation, and obviously during the season. So yeah, it's awesome to talk to you. So yeah, thanks again.
You got it. Yeah, I know that when I first started doing business with Dan a long time ago, and back in the early days of the internet, you had to get through who's the legitimate guys? Like who's really got whether it's a good business model or they knew what they were talking about, and which ones were just the fly-by-nighters. And Dan was, as a professional scout, Dan was a pretty, he was pretty. I don't know, taken back a little bit by offended, maybe a word, as far as those guys, trying to be professional. They don't really know football, but over time, Dan then learned, especially in fantasy, how important the business in the industry was, and then there were websites like yours that proved that you're not one of those fly-by-nighters. You're not one of those sites that just post things you don't really know what you're talking about. And so that's the thing that has really gotten big in the industry itself. And yet you've been able to survive it. Uh, did you ever feel like any of the other sites out there, whether it's Our Lads or other sites that put out content like you do, would be considered rivals?
Um, I don't know about rivals, but like there are certainly some other websites that have great content. There are a lot of other websites that have terrible content too. So, like you said, you kind of have to sift through it and just look at their history, like what they posted. Something we do, we never delete anything. So, like you can always look back. You can look back at our picks in 2002, for example. So, like you can
That's
see
good.
whatever
Yes.
we can see whatever we wrote in the past and kind of judge it that way. But as far as rivals, I feel like there's so many, for example, there's so many news networks on TV, and yeah, technically they're rivals, but they can all coexist together. And I
Yes.
think that it's good to have different opinions. So like, no one is going to be 100% correct all the time. It's like I'll look at other websites and see what they have to say, and sometimes I may be thinking, okay, yeah, I didn't think about that. Maybe I should change my thinking here. So I think it's good to have a lot of opinions out there.
And we're at a pretty significant point. I mean, there's so much going on, especially now on YouTube, and we just started our videos just a couple of years on YouTube. So but yeah, that's why I felt the same way, because I honestly, I think 5 years in or something like that, I would have never have thought it was probably a good idea to have you on one of our shows. I would have thought that there was early on, because again, we didn't really know who you were compared to, or I don't think a lot of people even knew what Our Lads was, unless you were like in the know. But like you said, I think what happens is you garner a lot of respect for the businesses and the websites like yours that have been able to not only withstand time but also continue to put out great information. And it's not just fantasy as well. You guys dabble into handicapping. You dabble into the NFL draft. So what's your favorite? Is there a favorite that you like doing more than the other?
Well, I think we're known most for our mock drafts, but I'd say my favorite is just handicapping the NFL season, doing the picks. When I first started the site, it was in 1999, it was November of 99. And the only things I had on the site were my picks against the spread, power rankings, and then I had links to NFL.com. That was it. So eventually I branched out. I first branched out to NFL draft. So I thought that was super interesting how teams could just improve overnight, basically through the draft. And then we did the next year we got into fantasy. So it went in that order. And so I think that that's probably the order in which I like things. I mean, I just love handicapping stuff. We branched out to for handicapping. We've done NBA. We've also done college football, obviously, but we started golf this year as well. So that's done pretty well. So yeah, I just love like the whole handicapping process and everything, just figuring out what's going to happen.
Yeah, the draft is fun, not just in the real NFL draft, but of course in fantasy draft. How many leagues are you in?
So I used to be in 6, which was I think my max. So I would get invited and be like, I can't handle more than 6 because
Okay.
at some point you're rooting for player A, but you don't
know.
want him to score too many points because then the other team's going to lose. So it just caused just a lot of havoc for me. But I think once the pandemic started, a lot of my leagues kind of just went away. So I think people during the year off, or if they took a year off for their league. For example, like one of my commissioners in a league I was in since 2006, he just stopped doing his league because he said, no, we didn't do the league this past year, but I enjoyed doing DFS more. I enjoyed betting online more. And so he just stopped doing the league. And 4 of my leagues folded like that. So last year I was only in 2 leagues, which was bizarre. I'm in 3 now, which I think is fine because I do a lot of DFS as well. I do Rainmakers as well on DraftKings. So kind of like tied up with that as well.
Do you do Dynasty?
We were in. I was in a dynasty league with a friend of mine, and we quit that league because we were we submitted our keepers for a year, and apparently my friend sent it to the wrong email address, or maybe I did. I can't remember. And they said They said they couldn't find our keepers, so they just let everyone go from our team. And like, I said, wait, I have this email. I can actually show it to you. Sorry, we sent it to the wrong email address. And the commissioner's like, no, we can't accept it. So we built this team from scratch. We took over for basically the defunct team. And then 3 years later, we were on the brink of championship contention. And we had to start all over. And I talked to my friend. I'm like, guys, I don't want to do this anymore. And he's like, yeah, I feel like the same way. So that was the last time we were in a dynasty league. I think that was 2018, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's like it's sort of like what happened in COVID. It's like you rip your heart out like at the end of a season if you thought, because I'm from New Jersey, so I'm like loyal to Rutgers as my state university. So when the basketball team was headed to the postseason for the first time, I'm like, oh, I just can't wait. This is going to be awesome. I've waited like my whole life for this. Boom, COVID, and they just rip it out. And ever since then, I've had a kind of a different outlook. I haven't had this outlook since the Washington Nationals. I used to be a Montreal Expo fan, and during the strike, ripped it right out of my heart as far as I was finally going to go to the postseason. And so I had it ripped out of my heart again in COVID. And it's one of those things that when you get older, the kids don't feel this way because they really haven't had these experiences, but it's almost like, I just don't need that. So I understand exactly how you feel. And it's because I think it's kind of pretty much the same, because we just started our dynasty league this year with Draft Sharks and our lads putting this partnership together. And we just finished the draft, and it's a lot of fun. No question about it. But once the draft is over, one of the guys was taking about, he had 8 minutes of a lot of time per pick. He was taking about 6 minutes, 7 minutes per pick. He's the only guy who was doing that. And I asked him, I says, why is he taking so long? Well, he's in 30 drafts.
Wow.
I mean, crazy. I don't know how you can do that unless it's a business.
Yeah. It's like, how do you keep track of that? I couldn't do that. At some point, it's not fun anymore. Yeah. I think the best part of fantasy is, getting together with your friends, whether it's in person or online, and just trash talking during the draft, and then you get to see
fun. Yeah,
right. You get to see who's going to have the best team at the end, and then you have the ultimate bragging rights heading into the next season. That's the best part of fantasy. But if you're in 30 leagues, like at some point, just you lose track of some stuff. And
like I said, it has to be a business at that point. It has to be. I can't imagine it's something that you have fun with. I just can't.
Yeah,
maybe you have one league or 2 leagues that you have fun with, and then you're like, all right, the rest of it's business. That's just, I'm going to put my computer together, and I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to try to make this, and which is I'm fine with. I mean, if that's how everybody, whatever they want to run their business with, that's completely fine if you make money off of it. But yeah, it's it takes it out of you. That's
Yeah,
not what it's about.
totally.
Yeah,
Yeah, totally agree. At some point, you might just consider doing daily fantasy because I think
true.
like you get more rewards that way. Whereas like in regular fantasy, if you do that as a business, like your money's tied up for
Yep.
4 months or so. So yeah, I think it's just
Good
better to
point.
do that. Yeah,
I'll have to have him on as a guest and just ask, how do you do it? Tell me, what's your
yeah.
secret? What is it that makes this like enjoyable for you? All right, so I tell you what we're gonna do is you can probably see it on the screen there. I've got the futures up from DraftKings because, like you said, predictions. This is, and I said to open. This is the time of year. So let's. I tell you what. Let's just quickly run through each division. AFC East, which is going to be such a tough division, as we all know. Do you think anything weird is going to go on, or do you think it's going to be status quo, where Buffalo's still the team to beat? The Jets and the Dolphins are going to fight for second, and I'm not sure anybody knows what's going to happen with New England.
So I think the Patriots are definitely going to be in last place. I think the Jets will challenge Buffalo. I think the Jets are closer to the Bills than the Dolphins. Um, I think that last year the Jets went 7-10, and 6 of their losses were by one score. So I have to imagine that Aaron Rodgers is going to turn a lot of those close losses into
Yes,
wins.
I would agree.
So I think that a 12-5 record, I don't think it's out of the question for the Jets. For the Bills, it really depends on Von Miller's status. I think if you look at the results last year, before Thanksgiving, they were arguably the best team in the NFL. After Thanksgiving, they had a lot of sketchy games. Like they needed 2 kickoff returns against the Patriots to beat them in the finale. They were losing to the Bears at halftime. They almost lost to the Dolphins twice, including in the playoffs to Skylar Thompson. They had a lot of games that were almost they almost lost those games to inferior opponents, and then we saw what happened to the Bengals in the playoffs. The reason was Von Miller's injury. He got hurt on Thanksgiving. Ever since then, they have the top 3 pass rush, and their pass rush fell into the middle of the pack. And Von Miller's coming off the torn ACL, so we don't know if he's going to be 100%. I've heard good things about him in practice, but we won't know until we see him on the field. So if Von Miller is not 100%, that pass rush is still going to be pretty questionable. And if so, I think that'll open up a possibility for the Jets to win the division. But if Von Miller's 100%, the Bills are going to be better than the Jets, so I think they'd win the division in that case.
It really is going to be hard to conceive that Von Miller could be back that quickly. It's just, especially at his age. But look, every guy is different. That's why they're freak athletes. We saw what Derrick Henry did. So not that it was an entire season, but still, yeah. And then, do you believe all this Stephon Diggs, all these rumors about him wanting out?
I feel like a lot of whenever I hear something like that, I think it's more media hype than anything.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's true, but more often than not, I think the media is just trying to create some like buzz to kind of generate clicks and views. I mean, Stephon Diggs is playing in the preseason with Josh Allen. He caught 2 passes the other day in the preseason finale. So I don't really have any concerns there. So I think that, like I said, their biggest issue is the pass rush. Also, Josh Allen was banged up at the end of the year last year. That was another reason why they weren't as good.
That's true. Yeah, people don't realize that exactly because he got hurt in the Jet game, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah,
he hurt his elbow. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And I had him on my fantasy team, but you would never have known it. Really, in fantasy, you would never have known it. But still, in real life, it had to take an effect, especially when you're not running the football. When you don't run the football enough and everything is regarding the passing game, that has to be a little bit of a crutch sometimes. That, I don't know, people can probably say it is, but I do believe Buffalo does need to balance themselves out a little bit. So we'll see if it comes back to haunt them or not. All right. So, by the way, do you think the Jets can handle the hype?
I think so. I mean, it's not like they have a young quarterback who's never had success. Aaron Rodgers has won MVP multiple times. He's won Super Bowl. And like I said, they were 7-10 last year, lost 6 games by 1 score. So they were better than people think they were last year. I think at one point they were 6-3. I think. And so, yeah, I think with that defense, it's already good. They have a Garrett Wilson, who's an exceptional receiver. We'll see about Breece Hall. I had concerns about the running game because Breece Hall is coming off the torn ACL. but Dalvin Cook should, he kind of negates those
I
issues that I
think,
have with the
yeah,
running game. So,
yeah.
yeah, I think the Jets will be fine. I don't think they're going to succumb to the hype at all.
Yeah, like you said, they really fell apart right after the injuries to Vera Tucker and Brees Hall, and once those guys on offense went down, they just had nothing going on that side of the ball. Okay, let's go to the North, which is really an underrated division. I mean, now of course they may not have maybe. I think people feel that the AFC East, those teams may be able to go a little bit further come postseason, or at least on paper, but it's a very balanced AFC North.
It's a lot of great teams there. We'll see about the Browns. I don't know about Deshaun Watson if he's going to bounce back to 2020 form. He was just horrendous last year. Like Jacoby Brissett looked like Dan Marino compared to Deshaun Watson last year. Watson was just like horrendous down the stretch, and Brissett actually played pretty well, but he's gone. So I don't. The Browns are a big question mark to me. I think they have high upside because they improved their defense, but Watson is just a big unknown right now. Obviously, the Bengals are, I think they're the favorites to win the division, and likely for good reason. I think they're arguably the best team in the NFL. I bet them at 11-1, as you can see on the screen there, to win the Super Bowl. I bet them on DraftKings. I like to bet one or two of the favorites as hedges for my longer shots, and the Bengals are, they're the only favorite, quote unquote favorite that I bet so far. So I think they're going to win the Super Bowl and win the division. But I like the plus 500 there for the Steelers. I think that's a really good value. The Steelers last year were 9-8. They missed the playoffs just barely. But if you look at how they did with and without TJ Watt, like we just talked about Von Miller. Without TJ Watt last year, they were 1-6, and they were 30th in pass defense EPA. With TJ Watt, they were 8-2, and they were 6th in pass defense EPA. And the only two teams they lost to were two teams that made the playoffs, the Bengals and the Ravens, and they also beat the Bengals and the Ravens otherwise in their other matchups. So they beat everyone they played last year with TJ Watt. And this offseason, they signed Isaac Seumalo to shore up the offensive line. They got Cole Holcomb. It's going to improve the linebacking core. They got Patrick Peterson. We'll see if he can play as well as he did last year. They drafted Joey Porter Jr. This team is, I think this team's loaded. And you saw what Kenny Pickett did this preseason. He played 5 drives, scored 5 touchdowns. If Kenny Pickett could take the next step, I think this team could win the Super Bowl, and I bet them at, I think it was 60-1. I know they're listed at 50-1 on DraftKings, but I found them at 60-1 on Bovada. So you shop. I always recommend shopping around.
Yes.
That's why I have like so many sports books. But I think the Steelers are my favorite long shot to win the Super Bowl this year.
That's wow. That's going from even making the playoffs to going all the way to the Super Bowl. That's pretty awesome. But again, keeping in mind, as we should, Mike Tomlin is a very, he's still, to me, a very underrated coach. And I don't know why that is. You still have a lot of people who believe it. Maybe that's because of the way Terry Bradshaw kind of feels about the subject. But the guy just wins, and that's all that really matters. And I agree. I think they could have a better look. They're 5-1 to win the division, and I wouldn't even rule that out because. But I agree with you with Cincinnati. I've been on top of them ever since Joe Burrow that first year, even though a lot of people just thought that they were, I don't know, the old Bengals. And they proved everybody wrong again last year. I don't see any reason to believe that they'll regress this year, except again the division's a little bit tougher. But Baltimore, you didn't mention Baltimore. Good feeling, bad feeling?
Yeah, Baltimore. If you were to tell me Lamar Jackson will stay healthy all 17 games, I would say they're going to make the playoffs. They're a really good team, but he hasn't finished the season the past 2 years, so we'll see what happens there. They lost an offensive lineman, Ben Powers. That's a big loss. Ronnie Stanley's health is a big issue as well. He hasn't been able to stay on the field. So a lot of question marks on offense. Like also receiver, is Odell Beckham going to be at least like 80% of what he was.
True.
Is Zay Flowers going to be able to play well as a rookie? Just a lot of question marks on offense. Defense is not going to be as good as it was last year. It's still going to be good, but not a great defense by any means. So I think the Ravens have a good chance to make the playoffs. I just don't see them making a deep run, especially with the injury concerns that they have.
So you're pretty okay. So see, the thing with them, the same thing with Tomlin, is it's so hard to bet against Harbaugh. These guys are such great coaches. that they're worth just a couple of wins by themselves, which makes them so dangerous too. So yeah, now they got a new offensive coordinator. So how's that going to help? Uh, it should, but we'll see. Okay, South, and talk about. We can go away from the great divisions now, or the balanced divisions. So this isn't very good. It's probably better than the South and the NFC, maybe. But all of a sudden, Jacksonville's the king of the South.
Yeah, they are. They barely won the division last year, but the Titans got a little bit worse this offseason, and the Jaguars got better. They got Calvin Ridley. Their defense was, I think, underrated last year. I think people remember how bad they were against the Chiefs in a couple matchups, but metrics-wise, they were better than people think they were. So I think they could take the next step this year. Trevor Lawrence is going to be in the second year of that system, and he was really on fire at the end of last year. So
he was.
I feel like that will just continue over. So I have a tough time seeing another team win this division unless the Jaguars have a ton of injuries. If so, I think it's going to come down to the Titans or the Texans. Titans are so well coached with Mike Vrabel. Texans are a little underrated, I think. Now they have a new quarterback, new head coach, and that gives me some pause. But defensively, they actually weren't that bad last year. Defensively, they were ninth in overall EPA, which was surprising to me when I saw that. The problem was their offense was so bad, but they had such terrible quarterbacking. So I assume CJ Stroud's going to be better. The receiving core, you have Robert Woods, who's going to be another year removed from that torn ACL. So I think he's going to be better this year. Tank Dell was impressive in that first preseason game. They have Dalton Schultz. Their offensive line is not bad. So I think the Texans could be better than people think. I actually was considering betting them to make the playoffs. I think there were like 11-1 or 10-1 make the playoffs, just as a long shot, because they have such an easy schedule. They not only do they play in their division, they also play every team in the NFC South. So I think so. Okay, so those are not good odds.
Yeah, this is down to 5-1 now. So yeah, that's 11-1's a lot better.
So yeah, it might have been 10-1 or 9-1, but I remember seeing a much better number out there. But yeah, plus 475 on not bad. But so it's either better in a different sportsbook or it was hammered by someone who really thinks they will.
Someone from Houston. Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, maybe. So
isn't the guy from Mattress Jack or whatever? Isn't he from Texas?
Right. Yeah, maybe he's the one who drove the line down. Yeah. So I think the Colts are the worst team in that division by far. I think, like I said, I think the Texans will. I think most likely the record will be like 7-10 this year. They're going to be a lot better than they were last year, but there's still a lot of work to do there.
And you agree with the decision? Day one, start Richardson.
It's tough because I think I actually would sit him because I don't think the offensive line is that good. I feel like the key to developing a quarterback is making sure his pass protection is really good. And the Colts have, they used to have a great offensive line back when they had Anthony Costanzo. Ryan Kelly was a good center, but he's declined. Costanzo's gone. I don't think Richardson's going to have the pass protection he needs to thrive. And I think that, he's not going to be quite like David Carr getting sacked 73 times in his first year, but he's going to be under pressure a lot, and that could really impact him negatively. So I like what Andy Reid did with Patrick Mahomes. He sat him for a year. I know he had Alex Smith, but still, it's not like the Colts are going to make the playoffs this year anyway. So I would sit Richardson for a year, make sure the offensive line is bolstered next year, and then I would start him starting next year.
Yeah, that's what I would do too. But you know how it is. Most of these guys, especially when they get a pick and they want to sell out tickets, especially this owner, it is what it is. I hope it doesn't screw around with his career because we need all the good quarterback play in the NFL we can get. So hopefully he'll be okay by this. All right. Taylor. Do you think he's any guess on where he'll end up?
So I heard a lot about the Dolphins. I saw that the Dolphins maybe offered a second-round pick for him. It's kind of confusing because they just used a second-day pick on a running back, so I don't know what they're doing. So I think they're probably the favorite, but I think a team that trades for Taylor needs to be one that views him as a luxury, kind of like the Eagles or the Bills. A team that is, hey, we can win the Super Bowl without him, but Taylor is going to give us a leg up and maybe get us over the top over the elite teams in the NFL. I just don't think that spending a top resource on a running back is good for a team that is pretty far away from winning a Super Bowl, like the
Yeah,
Dolphins.
good
The
point.
teams that were rumored to be trading for Taylor, Dolphins, Bears, like they're pretty far away from winning a Super Bowl, I think. So I don't think Taylor is going to solve their issues.
Yeah, because the Bills, that's a good one. I mean, that'd be perfect. That's exactly what they need. Cook should really be a number one running back, but we'll see. All right, let's go to the West, and it just doesn't matter who's out there running the ball or catching the ball. With Mahomes and Andy Reid, and now that offensive line, the Chiefs' offense is going to be dangerous. The defense, Spagnola's done a tremendous job, very underrated job there. So we know they're the odds-on favorite as well. They should be. The Chargers could be very interesting. It looks like that marriage there, now that they've got a new coordinator with Herbert, that could be everything that they need to get over the hump. And we kind of know where Denver and the Raiders are as far as they're still kind of rebuilding, and it's going to be tough in that conference to reach the postseason. So, what do you think? Any surprises here? Are you sold on the fact that the Chargers might be able to take the next step?
Yeah, I think this will come down to Chiefs Chargers. Last year, the Chargers had so many injuries. Yet Rashawn Slater was out for most of the year. Joey Bosa got hurt week 3. He didn't come back till the end, and he only played half the snaps in that playoff loss to the Jaguars. It's kind of, I think, one of the main reasons why they blew that big lead. Just he couldn't be on the field, and he really struggled to get to the quarterback late in the game. And also, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, they were hurt for many games. So
Yep.
if the Chargers could have the same injury misfortune this year, but if they don't, I think they have a really good chance to not only win the division but win the Super Bowl. I bet them at 30-1 of Bovada. They're 25-1 DraftKings. I still think that's a pretty good number.
It is,
because I think talent-wise, I think the Chargers are top 5 in the NFL. Last year, they took the Chiefs to the brink in week 2. Is in Kansas City. Justin Herbert got hurt at the end with his ribs. If he didn't get hurt, they may have won that game. And then later in the year, when they were kind of shorthanded, they still almost won that game. So I think the Chargers are like super talented, and there is some weakness here with the Chiefs, twofold. One, Chris Jones is holding out. If he doesn't play, that's a huge loss for the defensive line. Chris Jones is one of the top defensive tackles in the NFL. If you look at how the Chiefs have performed without him ever since he was on the roster, their defense is so much worse. Second, they have 2 new tackles. I don't know how they're going to play. Jawan Taylor, and then they signed someone else. So for the right tackle. So I think that there might be worse blocking for the Chiefs this year. So they have 2 concerns there. Obviously, Mahomes could erase those concerns all by himself. He's just amazing. But the Chiefs are coming off the Super Bowl win. I don't have an issue with Mahomes or Andy Reid. I have firmly believe they're locked in. But what about their younger players? Like they had a lot of young players in defense. Were they celebrating too much after the win? I don't know. I don't know if they're going to be as hungry as they were last year. So I think there's an opportunity here for the Chargers to kind of surprise everyone and win the division. And if they stay healthy, I think the sky's the limit for them.
Yeah, because let's remember, it's really just very hard to repeat as Super Bowl champion, especially as tough as the conference is. Like you said, there's still a lot of young players on the Chiefs that they're going to be relying on, even rookies at the skill positions. So that's just asking a lot. And I think because of that, it's like, okay, we know they're a postseason team, but at some point in those close games, like in the playoffs and the Super Bowl, you just can't win them all. You just can't. And so you would think that this would be one of those years where somebody might be able to take advantage of that. Maybe it's the Chargers. Do you believe that the Broncos and the Raiders are set up with their coaches?
I know that I know that Mark Davis had buyer's remorse about Josh McDaniels last year, and the only reason why I didn't fire him was because it would make him look bad. So I don't really have much faith in the Raiders. You hear Devontae Adams complaining. I think the Raiders are going to be pretty bad this year. The Broncos are a question mark. I think Sean Payton is going to turn that team around. But the question is, like, can Russell Wilson perform a lot better than he did last year? I think he's going to be better with Sean Payton than he was with Nathaniel Hackett.
Sure.
And we saw some improvement from him at the end of last year. He had that big game against the Chiefs where Jerry Jeudy kind of went nuts in that it's kind of a shootout. But I think overall they have some issues. Their offensive line is not as good as I thought it was. Garrett Bowles is really struggling right now. And their defense is not as good as people think it was. Their run defense, especially. So um, I think the Broncos will be more competitive this year. I think they
Yeah.
could make the playoffs, but overall, I think they're pretty far behind the top two teams in the division.
Yeah, because they had all those close losses. You were speaking about the Jets. I mean, how many? I could not imagine going through that season a Denver fan. All those games and losing most of them. That was really just. That's why they had to get rid of Hackett, just to wipe all of that bad taste off of them and start over again. So, yeah, they may not be as bad as or tough of a rebuilding job as the Raiders. So we'll see. And the Raiders just about at some point. I mean, and I guess it's going to be next year. They got to get their quarterback. Nobody knows who that is yet. So they don't have the franchise quarterback. Now, maybe Aiden O'Connell can, because look, we just saw what Brock Purdy did with the Niners, so anything's possible. I think O'Connell has a shot, but, and knowing Jimmy G, he's probably going to play in a couple of weeks. So this could be a year where Aiden O'Connell can, put on a show and maybe give the Raiders some food for thought. But then again, it's going to be a really good quarterback class next year or so. All right, NFC. So the Eagles, you think it's Eagles again? Or what do you think about the Cowboys? Because the Giants surprised some teams last year. Even Washington was a surprise team for most of the season. They faltered late. But more than likely a two-team race. And you think it's the Eagles again?
Yeah, I think it's the Eagles again. There's some concern with their coordinators. They lost both their
Yep.
coordinators, so I kind of wonder about that first game of the season against the Patriots because on one hand you have Bill Belichick having 6 months to prepare for this game versus a coaching staff with two new coordinators. Like that's a huge coaching advantage that the Patriots have. But then again, the Eagles have so much more talent than the Patriots. So I think that's a fascinating game to handicap. But overall, like I think the Eagles have the most talent, and I think they will win the division again. I just think the Cowboys are not coached very well. Not a big fan of Mike McCarthy. They lost their offensive coordinator. And so, like, the Cowboys are obviously a really good team. They have a lot of talent. I just don't like McCarthy. The Giants are interesting to me at 9-1. If the Eagles suffer some injuries and they're kind of knocked out, I think the Giants have a good chance to win that division. I'm kind of confused as to why they're 9-1.
Yeah, that's big.
If
Yeah.
I Yeah, if I were to set these lines, I would have made like them like 4-1 or 5-1. I think there's a lot of value with that. I know a lot of people like them to regress this year because they had a lot of close wins last year. They had an easy schedule, but that kind of reminds me of the rhetoric that I heard last year about the Bengals. You know, the Bengals went to the Super Bowl against the
Yeah.
Rams, and then everything I heard was like, "Oh, Bengals had easy schedule. They
Yeah.
they won a lot of close games." And people expected them to decline, but I thought they made a lot of good moves in the offseason, so I thought that would offset. I think the same thing could be said about the Giants. Their defense should be better. Their offense with Darren Waller is going to be much better. And then you have to consider that they had two top 10 draft picks last year who were rookies. I would think that at least one of them is going to make a big leap. If it's Evan Neal, the right tackle, their offensive line is going to be so much better. And then Kayvon Thibodeau with also Isaiah Simmons there rushing the passer, they should have a good pass rush. So if both those guys take the next step, I think the Giants could be a pretty dangerous team. Daniel Jones has never had a great offensive line. Last year was his best offensive line in his career. We saw him take a big leap. If he has much better blocking this year, I think he could challenge to maybe even win MVP. Now, I think I would give that to like Jalen Hurts or one of the other top quarterbacks. But I think the odds suggest that he would have a chance to do that. I think this is going to be a great year for Daniel Jones and the Giants.
Okay.
I have them making the playoffs. And like I said, if the Eagles have some injuries, they can steal this division.
All right, I like it. And by the way, do you believe in giving and Sam Howell a shot? I was intrigued by Howell in college, and how could you not be as a college fan? A couple years, well, his 21 season, which is phenomenal. He loses all his talent. Everything regresses. We've seen it happen before. And now he gets a shot. A couple years in, I think it's great that he gets a shot because, and I think he's got some weapons. So I am intrigued. And again, like I just said, I think it's important the NFL has more quarterback talent, and I'm intrigued with the new coordinator if they can make it work.
Yeah, I kind of like Washington better than the odds suggest. Like 13-1, I think is a little too high. I like how he was. We like to do mock drafts like years in advance, and I had my 2023 NFL mock draft out or was it 2022 NFL mock draft out like a couple years beforehand, and I had Sam Howell as the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah, you see? Yeah.
So yeah, I liked him a lot, and then yeah, his final year was worse for sure, but I think that he's shown some promise. You look in the preseason, he beat Dallas in the final game last year. In the preseason this year, it is pretty good. And he has a good receiving core with McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel. Running game should be better this year with Brian Robinson. He got shot last year and came back. Like I don't think he was 100% last year. No. So I think that he's going to be better. Their pass rush is phenomenal. They just have some holes that I'm worried about. The offensive line, I don't think is very good. Their linebacking core and secondary have been a problem for a long time, and I don't think they've resolved the issues. But I think they're going to be a competitive team. I could see them hovering around 500.
Yeah, Howell. The reason I really like Howell, I think he has a chance. He's athletic, and he can throw the deep ball. And those are two things that NFL loves out of their quarterbacks. And so we'll see. It should be interesting to follow them this season. The North, no more Aaron Rodgers, and the Detroit Lions. See, this scares me. I'd be scared. I'm a Jet fan. And I'm scared about all the news and all the. I'm a little bit, even though I'm going to enjoy it, even though a lot of Jet fans are very, they have a negative side about them that I know they're not going to enjoy it. But I can imagine the Lions fans feeling the same way. That wait, we're favored to win the division now. I mean, we haven't been into the playoffs. We haven't even. I mean, really? But they should be, really, if you look at it. The only thing is Minnesota. I know that everybody realizes they weren't as good as the record indicated, and it showed in the playoff loss. But are they being disrespected too much? And are the Packers being disrespected too much?
I think yes for the Packers. I don't know why they have worse odds than the Bears. I guess it's Justin Fields hype. But if you look at the rosters between the Bears and the Packers, except for quarterback, I have a tough time seeing maybe receiver one, maybe a couple positions. But like overall, I have a tough time seeing where the Bears are better than the Packers. Yeah. The Bears defense is going to be like very problematic because they don't really have a pass rush. No. So and the Packers do. So the Packers defensively will be better than the Bears. So I think that week one game, I think, should go to Green Bay. And so I think Green Bay and Minnesota are going to battle for second. Minnesota's defense is just so bad. I think that the Vikings this year could be kind of the opposite of what they were last year, where they started hot and then down the stretch you kind of saw them falter. And I know they still won some games, but you kind of really saw like the problems there. Like they were down huge against the Colts, for example. They eked out a victory. Yeah, they eked out a victory against the Giants the first time before losing to them in the playoffs. But I think this year the Vikings could start slowly, and then by the end of the year, I think they could be better just because Brian Flores is there coaching up the defense. I think that he could get a lot out of their young defensive players, and they have a lot of them. And so they could be playing better at the end. The Lions, on the other hand, I've been riding this hype train last year. I bet them last year to win the Super Bowl at 160 to 1.
Oh.
I just knew that number was insane to me. And like this team is pretty good. Yeah. It's just a different culture in Detroit now, not just with the coaching staff, but with the front office. The front office, they really invested into their scouting department a couple of years ago when they first got there. And I think that has made some huge improvements to how they've assembled their team. And you can see it. They have a great offensive line. Jared Goff is like, when he's protected very well, he's shown that he can be a good quarterback. Yeah. Now they have Amon-Ra St. Brown. They have Jameson Williams, who's basically a free draft pick that they got this year because he barely played last year. Now they have to wait 6 games for him to get back. But still, I mean, he's going to be a dynamic weapon for them when he returns. They have Jahmyr Gibbs, whom they view him as the next Jamal Charles or Alvin Kamara. So their offense should be great. Their defense last year improved a lot down the stretch. They were horrible in the first half of the year. In the second half of the year, they were very good. Aiden Hutchinson was almost unblockable in the second half of the year. And a lot of their young defensive backs stepped up. They added defensive back talent this offseason. So I think the Lions are going to take a big step forward. I had them last year they finished the season at 8-2. Almost made the playoffs if the Rams beat the Seahawks in that overtime game in the finale. They would have made the playoffs last year. And I think that some people think I'm crazy, but I think the 49ers are very lucky that happened, because I thought the Lions matched up so much better against the 49ers than the Seahawks did, just because they had the offensive line to block Nick Bosa and company. And the weakness of the 49ers is their secondary, which the Lions could have taken advantage of. So I think this year the Lions have a chance to win the Super Bowl. I bet them to win the Super Bowl. I bet them at 33-1 earlier in the offseason. I bet US. I think the line was driven down a lot, probably by the Sharps, to 22-1.
Yep.
I still think that number is not bad. So I think the Lions are a top 3 team in the NFC, as crazy as it sounds. But this is a different organization.
I mean, wouldn't it be something if like the Jets and the Lions were in the Super Bowl? I mean, wow, just blow your head up over that even possibility. Or Jacksonville and Detroit in the Super Bowl. I mean, but yeah, that's the NFL. That's why we love it. Matter of fact, I've been talking with Jeff Risdon over the last few years, who covers the Lions. And that's exactly what we talked about over the last couple of years. That we saw that from 2 or 3 years ago, that the changes started up front. So from the owner to management, that when you look behind the scenes, for the first time in a long time, Detroit had some really smart people in that organization. They hired the right coaches and down the line. So that's what happens. Okay. South. All right. Well, the South, just like the AFC South, it ain't going to be pretty. But any surprises in the AFC South? I mean, I'm a little surprised to see the Saints this much of a favorite. I mean, I think they should be the favorite, but even money, I don't know. Tampa Bay 10-1. That's huge. What do you think about the South?
Yeah, I think the Falcons have a better team than the Saints. I don't really know why the Saints are favored. I guess the hype with Derek Carr coming there, but I was never a big Derek Carr fan. He's not bad.
Sure.
I think he's just an average quarterback, which I guess is a big improvement over what they had last year.
Well, yeah.
But last year their big problem was their pass rush. They were bottom 10 in pressure rate. Now Marcus Davenport's gone. They're going to have to rely on 2 younger players, Brian Brisset, the Clemson defensive tackle, and Isaiah Foskey from Notre Dame. Now, like if those 2 guys have great rookie years, I think the Saints will have a good chance to win the division.
Or Turner breaks out.
Right, yeah. So exactly. So I just wonder how they're going to get to the quarterback. Whereas the Falcons have had that issue for a long time. But they signed Calais Campbell and Kaden Elliss. Kaden Elliss, another player the Saints lost. So their defense is going to be a lot better this year. They drafted Bijan Robinson. They have Drake London now with experience. They have Kyle Pitts, who was injured last year. He's coming back. I think you can make the case that the Falcons are better than the Saints. I think they're very close to each other. So if you look at plus 200 versus plus 105, I think it's a no-brainer. I think I would bet Atlanta. The other 2 teams I don't like very much. I think there's some sort of Mandela effect with the Panthers. Everyone tells me their defense is great, but their defense last year was, I think it was like 24th in defensive EPA. So I don't know where people are getting that from.
Great.
Maybe it's from Hassan Reddick in 2021, where they had that awesome pass rush. But last year it just wasn't there. So the Panthers with a rookie quarterback, I'm not really buying it. Buccaneers, just. Tom Brady, the Baker Mayfield is quite the downgrade, to say the least. But the Falcons, their only concern is Desmond Ridder.
Yeah.
But we've seen bad quarterbacks go to the playoffs before. I don't think that's
sure.
We're
just talking playoffs here. Yeah.
Right now, once they get to the playoffs, they're going to get smoked by the number 5 seed.
Yeah.
But we're just talking about this division.
That's it. That's all. And the thing is, Ridder gets the whole season to audition.
Right. And there's Taylor Heineke, who, he came close to beating the Buccaneers in the playoff game that one year. So,
and these teams, I know Atlanta has some ammunition, some draft ammunition, but everybody's going to be battling for that potential gold mine at the top of the draft next year. By the way, look at this. So the win the division almost even 2-1, but to win the Super Bowl, Saints 30-1, Falcons 60-1. How about that?
I don't quite understand that. I considered betting Atlanta to win the Super Bowl back in February when there was a chance Lamar Jackson would go there.
Yeah.
Now, luckily, I didn't place that bet. He didn't. Now, Atlanta's not going to win the Super Bowl unless Desmond Ridder makes an enormous leap. But I I don't quite get Saints 30-1 to
No.
win the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
At all.
30-1. Yeah, exactly. That they should be where the Falcons are, basically 50-1, 60-1. Okay, and then finally the West and the Niners as well. They should be the favorites, of course. I don't know what we're going to get out of the Rams this year because of Stafford, but boy, when we were going over their depth chart during the offseason, I had never seen anything like it as far as there was nothing there. I mean, they had so many roster spots open, and this is what happens when you mortgage and mortgage and mortgage the future. And they won the Super Bowl. Okay, but ramifications, and this is what happens. So Cardinals are huge. I think this is one of the biggest at 35-1 to win a division. Now, what happens if something happens with San Francisco injuries and Kyle Murray comes back faster than you think? 35-1. That's nuts. And then Seattle, yeah, I mean, if Geno keeps playing well and that offense looks very dangerous, do they have the defense though?
Yeah, their defense was horrendous last year. You talked about how the Vikings were a misleading team last year. I think the Seahawks were right there with them. And we kind of saw it in that, I think it was the Germany game against Tampa Bay, where I think Seattle was a short favorite, and Tampa Bay just kind of destroyed them. And I think that was kind of like a hint that of like things to come for Seattle. And yeah, they got destroyed by San Francisco twice late in the year with Brock Purdy. Now their offense is going to be good, like you said. I think Geno Smith's going to continue playing well. He's worked very hard to revive his career, and I don't see that changing. And they added Jackson Smith and Jigba, and also Zach Charbonnet. So their offensive line's good. So their offense as a whole should be fine. I just worry about the pass rush and run defense. They were both horrible last year, and I don't think they did enough to address those areas. So I think Seattle is an overrated team for that reason.
Okay.
San Francisco is the best team in that division, but only by default because I think obviously they have great talent. I think Brock Purdy is going to play better this year, I think. But my worry is they lost Mike McGlinchey, right tackle, is a big loss. We'll see if the replacement it does as well. If he doesn't, George Kittle is going to have to block more, which is going to be a problem for Purdy because Kittle caught so many passes from him last year down the stretch. And then defensively, they lost some talent on the defensive line, or some depth, I should say. They still have that front end depth, but we'll see with Nick Bosa. He's currently holding out. If he doesn't play week 1, I think Pittsburgh's a great play betting wise. But I don't know. They need that to be resolved because their defense is not nearly the same without Nick Bosa. But just look at the other 3 teams of the division. They talked about Seattle already. The Rams, like you said, their depth chart is awful.
Yeah.
They'll win some games when Stafford, Kupp, and Donald are healthy, but late in the year, like last year, they're probably going to be out. The 2 or 3 of them are going to be out.
Probably, yeah.
Right, and then Arizona 35-1. I don't think they could make that high enough for me to bet. Like I thought about it for a second when he said 35-1. Like in my head, like what if they were 350-1? Would I bet them? I don't think I would. I just think they're such a bad team. They're such a bad, yeah. Even $1. I don't think like you might as well just light it on fire. Like I think you'd get more out of that than betting them because they have no talent on defense. Their pass rush is it's like a wasteland. I don't know who's going to get to the quarterback. Secondary is a disaster. Now Kyler Murray is coming off a torn ACL. Even if he comes back. I've heard he's not going to play this year, but even if he does come back, he's not going to be able to run as well. They have some offensive pieces: Marquise Brown, James Conner. These guys are okay, but overall, this team is just horrendous, and I think they're going to have the number 1 pick in the draft.
What do they do with that?
According to Mike Jurecki, who's a phenomenal reporter for the Cardinals, he said that if they had the number 1 pick, they were not going to take a quarterback because Kyler Murray's contract is too problematic. So they're going to trade it to a team drafting second, third, et cetera. He mentioned the Buccaneers specifically, but I think a number of teams make sense for a trade there.
Okay, so you think that no matter what you're hearing by some people that they're going to try to move on from Kyle Murray, his contract is just unmovable. So
I think so, and with their picks, they could take Marvin Harrison Jr. They can use the other first-round pick to bolster the defense, and then they're going to have a ton of other picks if they trade out of number 1.
Oh yeah.
That'd
be huge.
Yeah, and I would like to see Kyler Murray have a chance without Cliff Kingsbury.
Sure.
I was never a big fan of that hire. I think his offensive play calling was very poor, and so with a better coaching staff, I think Kyler Murray could do better. Now, question is like, is A, his work ethic. He's been questioned about that, and B, his health. He hasn't been able to play a full season in his career. So you have those two question marks. But with Paris Johnson there on the offensive line, protecting him better, I think that there's a chance when he returns in 2024 that he could maybe stay healthier just because the offensive line is going to be better.
All right, so that's a prediction right there that Kyle Murray is not going to play in 2023. Okay, so what did you make your official picks as far as who is your Super Bowl pick? Have you made that yet?
Yeah, I have. So I had the Bengals versus the Lions going to the Super Bowl. I bet both teams, as I said earlier. I think the Bengals are the best team in the NFL, especially with Orlando Brown there protecting Joe Burrow's blind side. I think that's a huge addition. And the Lions, I have the Lions and Eagles. I had them in the NFC Championship. I couldn't decide who the winner is going to be, and I thought Bengals Eagles would be too boring. Like I think that's too chalky. So I wanted to have one.
The last two losers.
Right. I wanted to have one chalky team and then one kind of surprise team. That's usually my formula. So maybe the Lions aren't too much of a surprise because they've been bet down so much. But I think that people still think Eagles Niners are the teams to beat in the NFC, and it could be right. And whenever I say the three best teams in the NFC, when I talk to people around here, like three best teams in the NFC, Eagles, 49ers, Lions, like people, I feel like people just ignore what I say about the Lions. They're like, oh, Eagles, Niners. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And then just ignore what I say about the Lions. So I think they're kind of a surprise there.
We'll find out next Thursday. That could be a big, eye opener for a lot of people who don't believe in the Lions, and a big deal for them as well. Because that, you never know. I mean, it's first week of the season. That could be a huge stepping stone game for Detroit. Give me a sleeper, somebody that could go from. I'm just looking right here, and I'm going to say your sleep. I already know what your sleeper is. It's going to be Pittsburgh.
Oh yeah, Pittsburgh for sure. Like I said, I bet them 60-1. I just go over real quickly. Like I said before, they were 9-8 last year, but 8-2 with TJ Watt. And they made good additions this offseason to the offensive line, secondary, linebacking core. Mike Tomlin, as you said, great coach. I can't imagine that they're going to have a worse season unless they have a ton of injuries. And I think Kenny Pickett's going to take the next step. Also, George Pickens has more experience too.
Yeah.
They have a lot of firepower there. Jaylen Warren looks great. So they have a 1-2 punch at running back as well. So I think the team is so underrated right now. I think you can make the case that they're a top 5 team in the NFL, certainly top 10, but maybe even top 5. And I think that 12-5 is not out of the question, and they could certainly go to the Super Bowl too.
By the way, Jaylen Warren, another example that I'm sure owners and GMs are going to use as far as, you see, I don't need to pay this guy, goggles of money. I can just sign one after the draft. Put him on. I mean, Pittsburgh. I mean, that kid's, what is he making? $1 million, $1.5 million, something like that for the next 3 years. He can end up the number 1 running back by the end of the year, the way he's playing. So
yeah, they spent a first-round pick on a running back, and he's being outproduced. Or almost outproduced by their undrafted guy. So it's bizarre.
It is, but that's great story. Okay, Walter, great job. I really enjoyed our conversation. I hope we can do this more often. And again, I look forward to booking you on Mark's Playbook show. I think that'll be a lot of fun getting you and Andy together, talking about contests in Vegas and so forth. So. Once again, appreciate it. Best of luck this season at walterfootball.com. And appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I can't wait to do more content with you guys. And yeah, best of luck to you as well.
Thanks, Walter.